When I was in engineering school, I had a professor, and his quote was that you're an engineer who worked on rockets, or you're a guy who flips burgers for the guys who work on rockets. Huntsville loves rockets. We love missiles. We love anything that basically explodes. So my question as a marketer now is, how does that industry work? How do you actually market companies and get into these type of industries? And funny enough, I actually used to work in this industry. You see, after school, I went and I worked for a company called KBR, where I was a CETA contractor working on the Patriot missile. Which was a really cool opportunity. I got to learn a lot about the Patriot missile and engineering and working on a large team and organization and stuff like that, which was great. But here's the catch. As a CETA contractor, I got to learn that nothing makes sense in defense contracting. You have all these large customers. You had Raytheon, who technically owns the missile, but the warhead's made somewhere else, and the booster's made by Aerojet Rocketdyne, and everything seemed really complex. And I don't even understand how the business side of it works. And to prove my point, let me show you how traditional marketing is so different from government contracting. So traditional marketing is easy in concept, but difficult in practice. And let me show you what I mean by that. So this is how our traditional market works. You have the seller, and let's say in this case, I sell gum. So if I have gum, I want to sell my gum to this market. But there's a lot of market. There's a lot of people who chew gum. And my goal is to get as many of these people to chew gum as I can. Well, I can either create content, can pass out some business cards, shoot some videos showing how great the gum is, go on Shark Tank, you name it. But the goal is to get as many people as I can in this market chewing my gum. Government contracting is not the same. So let's say instead of gum, I make missiles or bombs or whatever it is. So I want to connect to the market. However, the market, instead of being a bunch of people, is one guy named Tim. Tim controls that contract. And so in order to sell what you're trying to sell, you have to figure out, how do I get one person? That's your market. Okay, so it's a weird industry, right? But I want to talk to someone who's actually in government contracting and get their real feedback from them.
So my name is Randall, Cottrell, CEO of a company called Jireh, buying missiles and helicopters and stuff like that. We arrange those meetings. We also do a lot of engineering and manufacturing. We recently won our first true aviation contract, and that was to work with the Air Force Test Pilot School.
Government contracting feels so concentrated because the key decision makers are very few, which can lead to like large corporations swallowing up all these big contracts because they have the money and the funds go and lobby, and I'm not going to say evil, but somewhat nefarious in the ways that they practice this.
Some of them are very bad.
Do you think that this industry is set up this way on purpose, or do you think that it's just how the cards fell?
I'm gonna lean towards how the cards fell. If you look at the defense industry in World War One, you start to see like true industrialization, existing companies to keep the war supplied, the war fighters supplied. Get to the Depression, go to World War II. Now you have people who have been in the game and they know people. Now you got to think, if you were 30 years old in World War One, in the 20s, there's a good chance you're still around and running a company or in politics in the 40s. And so the whole thing now that seems so nefarious is like, now you have a lot of companies that exist because of old relationships. I think the cards fell the way they fell based on these old relationships back when war was industrialized. And now that it's monetized and industrialized, relationships that are just old, and they make sure they carry them on.
What's your approach to marketing for defense contracting? Because it seems very different.
Well, so we're about to build a rocket. The first thing you do is you go find somebody who can build it, find the subject matter expert. And then here's the key though. You got to find somebody you can get to know who can actually say either here's where you go or here's the money for it. It's going to come down to relationship.
How do you approach building those super key relationships?
We've had one person who went to bat for us, got us our first contract, and then protected us. I've found that if you can align around family, you might get somewhere. A lot of these people they work really hard. They work a lot. So the things they do outside of work are usually centered around family or life. I got to go to the customer and go build a relationship.
How do you approach that?
Either find somebody to represent you or you got to move there. And you got to show up at that random time, at that random Starbucks where somebody randomly hears you and goes, I like that person. I want to talk to that person. They can solve a problem for me. But I guarantee you, all of those people have either paid their way into a relationship or actually made one. You're going to get your shot. It may not be the shot you want, but you'll get it if you're constantly trying to win that contract.
Well, how do you get Tim, at Amardek? How do you get him?
I've had to go and find the Tims.
Yeah.
And I found them and realized that it didn't matter. If I can't speak the language and I can't get them to like me, because guess what? They get approached by everybody. And Tim is like, I've already heard from everybody. There's an award that just came out. Man, the guy that's supposed to get it did not have his registration in order. So the Tim is going to be like, but his stuff is not in order. It's still a good old boy system.
Yeah.
And you got to play the freaking game. All right, man. Well, I appreciate it, Tom.
Okay, so I had a really good conversation with Randall. I liked what he said about the industry and how to break in and how it's all about relationships, which is true for most industries. However, I really wanted to know, did government contracting just destined to be a good old boy system where it's just a bunch of old crusty white guys in some room deciding, what 5 companies are going to win a contract or not? And to answer that question, I actually have another friend. He had mentioned Jonathan Hard over at H2L, and I actually know him and his company. So I'm going to swing over there and ask him. Let's go see.
No, don't.
I can tell you there's I tell you some money.
Do you think that government contracting always going to be this good old boy system?
So I think it definitely used to be a who you know, good old boy system back in the day. But with social media platforms and your ability to reach out and touch people that might not have known that you even existed is more relevant than it ever has been, right? And that's the biggest thing, is using marketing, social media to get their attention, to where then maybe, I hate to even call it that, maybe you can be plugged in to the good old boy system, because people want to do business with who they can trust, who's reliable, and really who they like and who they want to do business with.
If you could change the system in any way, what would you do?
I would change it to where it would be unbiased on whenever the government gets a proposal and they're reading the proposal, there are no feelings connected with whatever company submitted that proposal. If they could figure out a way to make it fair and really fair, where if it's a technical volume and that company has written a technical submission that's a masterpiece, it gets evaluated that way. And these people aren't maybe looking how to degrade it a little bit to where the company that they want to win wins. And there's a good old saying that for solicitations even let out, the government knows who they want to win it, right? Now I don't know if that's true or not, but that's why I hear all the time from other people that are in the industry. And I hope that's not true, but I would say in some cases that's probably 100% true. And that's what we've been doing for the past 9 years. And it's we're still around, so
something's working.
Something's working. Something's working.
So the biggest takeaway for me is really just emphasizing relationships. Both Jonathan and Randall, at the end of the day, really emphasized how important it is to develop strong relationships with your client or potential customer, or whatever that looks like. Be in the position where you can have those organic encounters with a client that potentially could become an amazing relationship and a fun partner to work with.